Welcome back to the Best Ever You Global Summit. I'm Kris Fuller here with Elizabeth Hamilton-Guarino, and we are very excited to introduce our next speaker, Deb Landry. Deb Landry is an author, certified parenting coach and life coach, professional operational consultant, podcast host, and activist for children's rights. She is the author of Independence, a memoir of secrets, discovery, and forgiveness, and has also authored 3 children's books. A humanitarian and philanthropist, Landry specializes in bullying and harassment prevention and safe school climate planning. Deb knows firsthand how childhood trauma can psychologically affect the growth of youth and has spent over 20 years as the co-founder and executive director of Crossroads, a youth character education nonprofit with a focus on developmental education to raise resilient and respectful youth. Please join me in welcoming Deb.
How are you today?
Wonderful. Deb is the author of Independence, a memoir of secrets, discovery, and forgiveness. We're going to be talking with Deb today about the discovery and forgiveness part. But before we start, I just wanted to mention that Deb is also the founder of Bryson Taylor and then Crossroads Youth Center. Deb, you were just recognized in the state of Maine for all that you do. Can we just start there?
Oh, yeah. Are you talking about the sentiment? Is that what you're talking about?
I just love everything.
Which award? Not that I get a lot, but I just
sprinkle that glitter, right, Kris?
Yeah. Yes, it was for our nonprofit organization Crossroads, and it was for 21 years of service to the youth community of Maine and surrounding areas. So I was really excited about it. It means a lot to me.
Yeah, I love Kris. I love Deb. She's one of the first people I met when I moved here to Maine, and she's always included me in her world where she could, and I just absolutely love her. And so thank you for being here. It means a lot.
Well, thank you so much for asking me. I'm so excited to be here.
So, well, let's just get started because you've got this incredible book out there. It's called Independence, Memoir of Secrets, Discovery, and Forgiveness.
Yes. Well, I started writing the book about, I think it took me about a year to write the book, and I decided to write the book because one morning I got up thinking I had a match, and it wasn't a match that I thought I was getting on Ancestry. And it was the 35th anniversary of the death of my father. And what I found out was through that match that it wasn't his match, and he wasn't a match, and he wasn't my biological father. So I want to say I was about 60, 62 when I found this out. So I went through my whole life thinking my dad was my dad, and it started to answer a lot of questions that I always had. Why doesn't my mother like me? It's like everybody thinks their mother and father doesn't like them when they're a teenager, but I knew my mother did not. I was not one of her favorite people. But she treated me with such hatred, just hatred. And it was, so as soon as I found this out, it's like, now I got some answers on why she has always treated me that way. But other than having those few answers, it just opened up a Pandora's box. And when that box opened up, everything went in every which way. And so I spent some time looking, what went on, why, and I said, well, this is a great book to write. Who goes through this? What I found out was a whole lot of people are going through this now with the DNA thing. So I decided what I decided to do, and what I ended up doing was 2 different things. What I was looking for was the forgiveness part, which I didn't know when I started writing the book. So I spent a year doing the book, and then, focusing on my mother and why she was a certain way, and why did I feel a certain way? But what I found out was so many people like me escape inward, and with the result of having negative messages given to them, such as shame and fear and never feeling good enough. And that's why, in the end, that's why I started writing the book.
So I can't imagine. I mean, it's neat that you say so many people have related to that, and you didn't know how many people would have a similar experience or story. But it must have been. I also write and blog daily about what's going on in my life, and looking back and reading things, it's incredible to me how that
gives you perspective or changes it. Like, what was it like for you writing it and then sort of living it and doing it and writing it? Like, was it easier? Did it help you in the writing of it? Or how's that for you, writing about it as well as sort of uncovering it all within yourself?
I think that so now that the book has been out since August, and it was just like any other thing in your life, ups and downs. It was like, oh, I got to write this all down. This is a great story for everybody to read because, I am a writer. So, I wanted to write it down. But then there were so many ups and downs. What I learned was the true meaning of forgiveness, because I was up, I was down, I was depressed, I was overwhelmed, I was shocked because 65 years of my life, I'm over 65. So 65 years of my life was a lie. And, it's like you wake up and you don't know who you are. So I really, really had to take a look at what forgiveness was and who it was for and all these things. So it was quite the roller coaster ride.
So Deb, what have you learned? Yeah, we're going to have a forgiveness chat here. I have spent I love this topic. Just so you know, I've spent a lot of my life researching the topic of forgiveness. So I am so interested to hear what you think and feel and say and have written and so forth. So this is meaningful. I've got my pen like I do with a lot of our guests. So taking notes. Yeah, you have to. What'd you say, Kris? Sorry.
I was just gonna add to that and say, so yeah, it's interesting when you're telling your story that the focus became forgiveness. So why forgiveness? Like, why should we forgive? What are your thoughts on that?
Like I said, 60 years of trying to understand what was going on in my life, and then forgiveness. Why forgiveness? So I thought in my head that I needed to forgive my parents, who are both deceased, so that I could move on. People tell you need to forgive and forget. To me, forgiveness is not the word. To me, forgiveness never related to what I thought forgiveness was. So first of all, I had to learn what it was and why I needed to do it. So, I had such a shock, and it's like, why should I forgive these people that lied to me for 65 years? So as I went on learning about forgiveness, really diving into what the word means, because I think a lot of people don't know what it means. And you say, they might say to you, forgive and forget, just forgive and forget. You forgive and forget are two words that don't go together.
Well, especially if you have a good memory.
Exactly. It's like,
it's pretty tough to forget that.
Yeah. How can you forget that somebody did something traumatic to you? Yeah. And so when I say forgive and forget, you don't forget, you forgive. But why do you forgive? So you forgive not for that person. You forgive for yourself, so that you can move on in life and you can get over. You know how sometimes we, something's really bugging us and we just can't get over it, and we just like harp on it. You need to move forward. So how can you move forward? Recognizing that somebody did something to you. You don't have to understand why they did it to you. You just have to forgive that happened and move on. You never forget. You'll never forget. And it will rear its ugly head over and over again. But you need to put yourself in a place where you understand it.
One of the things that somebody said to me one time that I thought was really clever was, in terms of this topic, was, they might not have intended that either. For example, they just might be at a different point in their journey. So we kind of know what we know at the time that we know it. And because we're all growing and changing all the time. And so sometimes that's an interesting way to apply forgiveness to people, like they didn't know better, or that's what they did, or they were doing their best, or whatever at that moment in time. That's what they knew or did.
You're exactly right. And people get so hung up on, because there's many different ways of forgiveness. And one thing that always baffled me on understanding forgiveness is when people are in a courtroom and somebody is forgiving somebody that murdered somebody that's close to them. How do they forgive? So you can go from that to somebody calling you names or something. There's many that, it's a wide variety, but in this case, we're talking about me, finding out. And it's tough. So what I had to do is go back and revisit. So with spending time with family members that were still alive, researching, I had to do a lot of work because the two people I wanted to have answers from were dead. So how do I get all these answers? So it was a year-long process of going through and finding out why and how they did this. And then one of the things I realized is, okay, aside from what my mother was like, because we knew that she was, had a very, she had a mental illness and was narcissistic. Aside from all that, instead of blaming a mental illness, I went back and looked at, okay, it's 1953. She's 19 years old. She has a relationship with some guy, and this is all true. He comes into town. She meets him, spends one night with him. He leaves town, and now it's 2 months later, and she's pregnant. And what does she do? Well, what do you do if that happens today? What do people do? People just, they go on. Sometimes people get pregnant and don't get married. It's not a big deal anymore. But it was 1953. So what does she do now? And so I took that all into consideration. What's a 19-year-old going to do when she finds out she's pregnant? So that helped me understand that her choices were not about me. They were all about her. So what was she going to do in that minute and in that time? And what she did was she found somebody that would marry her. And, and then what was a very small thing turned into a very large thing. I'm not calling myself large. I'm calling the situation.
Yeah.
So I had to go back and look at that. Yeah.
That's super complicated for sure. All the bits and pieces of it. What I want to ask you right there is, when you found this out, were you super angry at first, or what was your instant reaction? And then
instant reaction was shock.
Yeah.
Just total, like, am I awake? Like, it was a Sunday morning. I got up and had my coffee. It was the anniversary of my father's death. It was, we had done DNA testing just for fun. And I checked my emails. I'm reading the newspaper, and it just said you have a match. The match wasn't mine. It would belong to my son, because we did it. We did DNA for him because he's adopted. And then all of a sudden, I wasn't expecting anything. It was like a big slap across the face, and I was totally shocked. Yeah. So after the shock, I was sad. Very sad, crying. The first thing I did was call my aunt and talk to her about it. And, and it was things like, can you call my other aunt, who was 95, living in a nursing home, and can you ask her what she knows? And she's the only person that has a clue. And she said, honey, I would, but she died the other day. Oh. So then the anger came. So the anger came after the initial shock that, my daddy is not my daddy. This person that, he is. I always make sure that I say he's my dad. I have a biological father, but he's my dad. And I would be a hypocrite to think that anything else, because I am a mother of an adopted child. I'm not into the bio thing. It's like, you nurture nature. It's all nurture. And but I actually had to deal with that myself too. So a lot of anger. Yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine. I can only try to imagine, but you just can't if you haven't gone through it. You talk about the shock and you talk about the anger, and those are the reactions from how you received the news. There's a lot of different stages to forgiveness too, though, right? Like
there is.
Will you talk to us about some of those stages?
Sure. There are tons of stages, and there are tons of people out there that have their own little 15 steps of changes, or 5 steps of changes, or 4 steps of changes. I made mine really simple so I don't forget them, because I teach people all the time, but I have to remember to teach myself and be my best student that I can be to myself. So self-care. So I come up with five and I call them the 5 R's. I'm really into acronyms and things like that, but I get the 5 R's going. And mine are reflection. Number one is reflection, reflecting back on your pain. So I go back a lot of times to sitting on that sofa thinking that morning, reflect why am I feeling the pain, and knowing and acknowledging I'm having the pain. And then, so then you don't hold back as much if you reflect. If you reflect and it's sitting in front of you, then you can deal with it. You can start to deal with it, start to understand, and start to release some of the anger and the resentment that you hold on people. Mine, in my case, was my mother. I just resented that she spent her whole life throwing all her anger on me of what happened to her. If she hadn't been a person that blamed me for everything she did, I probably never would have looked beyond that. But it was very clear to me that she was angry about something and blamed me for everything that happened wrong to her. I just assumed it was something she did. I didn't think it had anything to do with me. So I have to reflect on that and just say, okay, I know why I'm upset. I know why I have this anger, and I know that I have resentment. Now, what am I going to do about it? So that's the second thing. And that's when, you start thinking about, what are you going to do about that? And then you talk about, revising your feelings. So how can I change how I feel? And part of that is, I gotta look at how I feel and revise that. How do you do that? It depends on you. And what is, it's something like, okay, let's say you're a religious person. So then what do? You pray. Let's say you're not a religious person. You meditate, you journal, you talk to a therapist, you hire yourself a life coach. Do one of them or do all of them. You can listen to music. You can, there's just so many things that you can do to start helping yourself immediately to revise those negative feelings into positive feelings. It can be something as simple as, you don't even have to meditate. You can just start breathing correctly. But start on that path so that you increase those endorphins and get going, and find somebody to talk to if you have to, just to look at that inventory of what you're feeling. And then hopefully, you can start on your journey. It is something that you just don't do overnight. But revising your own feelings is very important. Okay, on the fourth thing is relinquish the resentment. So you relinquish your resentment, and that's when you move on. That's after you get help. And then once you do that, you can, move on to number 5, which is repairing. And repairing whatever you need to repair in your life. And so what I want to say about these 5 things is that you, in the end, you're going to be able to forgive, but who are you forgiving? You're forgiving yourself. That's the most important thing. People that did you wrong may ask you for forgiveness, but then again, they may not, and they might care less. So who gets forgiven? It's you. You're forgiving yourself. Once I came to the conclusion of what forgiveness really meant, and I was forgiving myself, it was just amazing. I let that all go. And I actually now can talk about my parents without resentment, without revisiting all the pain, and I don't go through all that process anymore. So that's really good. So that's kind of, where the forgiveness ends up when you start doing these steps. There's many steps out there that you can break down into many, many little baby steps. And and if you have a lot of forgiveness and a lot of anger, I think those are great to revisit and do all those. But doing all those 5 things is, I think, great. It's a nice start.
So can you tell us the 5 again, just one by one? That would be really helpful.
So number 1 is revisit what you're dealing with, who needs forgiveness, why. Number 2 is, reflect on what the pain is. So reflect. Number 3 is revise your thinking. And number 4 is relinquish the pain. And number 5 is start to repair.
Thank you.
So those are your 5. I think I did 1 and 2 all together when I
Yeah.
was talking. I'm so used to just talking all about it.
Yeah, it's okay.
But that's handy that they're all our words though, because then they're really easy to like catch on to that. I like, you
That's why I did that.
alliteration too. You made it really easy for us and for our listeners. And I think it's so interesting when you're talking about this forgiveness, it's maybe what people didn't expect is you talking about forgiving yourself, right? I think a
Right.
lot, myself included, I thought, oh, this is going to be how she came to find forgiveness for her parents and moved forward. And so talking about that forgiveness for yourself, such a key thing. And I think when we're
Yeah.
looking at forgiveness, like what would you say, like people like I had an expectation you're going to forgive your parents, and now that changed for me, obviously listening and looking at your work. So what would you say, what should people expect or not expect in the bucket of forgiveness? Like,
I think they get peace. It's self-peace, self-confidence, self-peace, self-reassurance. Everything is self. And it doesn't have to be, and I do forgive my parents. They were living their own hell. It is not me to be the judge and jury of choices they made as teenagers. So I am the result of that. And being angry about something like that, I wouldn't be here if it didn't happen. So getting rid of that and having an inner peace about it. This is one thing that I highly recommend for people that are divorced. Because you hear people a lot of times, oh, my ex-husband, oh, my ex-wife, forgive and move on, because that relationship is over. Until you do that, you won't have a good, successful relationship. So you have peace and you're able to move on and live a better life. So
in the end of your memoir, you talked about what forgiveness meant to you. Can you explain that?
Sure. Like I just said, it was about, towards the end, I just realized it was all about me. I had to forgive myself for everything, for the anger I felt towards them, for feeling all the pain I did. All the things I forgave myself were not like, oh, I didn't do anything wrong, but I gave myself the energy, the power, the peace to move on and forgiving myself. But I do forgive them because, again, like I said, it was their, it was the choices they made in that minute. And we are all human. We are not, we all make mistakes. So if you expect somebody in your life to, marry you and be in a relationship with you, have you as a child, whatever, and be perfect, it's not going to happen. You're setting yourself up. So what you're doing is you're learning to be a better person and to be understanding. Of course, you don't take, you don't just lay down and let people roll all over you and, run you down, but you have to have some compassion for people. So just remembering having good character and having all those things, peace, understanding, love. And if you're going to give those things out, make sure they're given to yourself first.
I don't think we ever got what your true meaning of forgiveness was. Maybe you said that, but did you actually have like a definition or anything that crafted?
Yeah, well, it's kind of like you think, what is forgive and what is forget? Okay. And forgive is like it. So here's my example of that. 2 little kids are playing and one hits the other one, and the mother runs up and says, don't do that. You made them cry. Tell them you're sorry. Okay, fine. The kid says, I'm sorry, and they move away. And so the kid thinks, oh, well, I can hit that kid anytime I want. All I have to do is say, I'm sorry. And you just can't forgive, and you just can't forget, and you just can't say, I'm sorry. You have to reflect on that. What does that mean? I don't like kids, I never did this either, telling my kids to say they're sorry. I usually had them sit down and reflect on it. So one of my R's. So you reflect on it. Why did you do that? And how do you think you made them feel? Would you like them to do that to you? And, and go on and on. And that's kind of the process you go to. You can make it real simple. Forgiveness is something you do. It's, if you look up the definition, any psychologist is going to tell you it's something that you do so that you can move on and you can be in a better place. So you got to reflect. You just can't say it. Oh, I forgive you.
Yeah.
And then do that.
One more layup on that one is just, can you talk about how this all applies also to someone, sorry, my watch is beeping. Can you talk about how, forgive me, can you talk about this in relation to some of the other books that you've written in the topic of bullying? That would be a
Sure.
very important takeaway as we're.
I do. Right now, we're doing a lot of work in our podcast, Raising King podcast, about domestic violence and domestic abuse and things like that, which kind of falls into my book, and which relates highly with what I've been doing for the last 20 years, and that's bullying prevention. I have a new book coming out in a couple of months called Summer's Shadow, and Summer is a girl that has a metaphorical shadow over her from being bullied. And my other books are all about bullying prevention, all about everything we talked about today. Bullying is has the same criteria, I guess, as, for lack of better words, as domestic violence. You know, somebody is stalking you and somebody's doing something to you that you don't want being done to yourself, and you don't know how to get out of it. So all my books, everything is on character education or bullying prevention.
What is your why behind that? Why?
My why?
Yeah, why? Why do you do
Well,
what you do?
I didn't know for 60 years what I was doing. So it was just something I'm attracted to. I was attracted to helping kids understand that there is somebody always there for you if you're bullied. And it kind of started when my son was bullied. But reality is, it goes right back to my book. My book starts out when I'm 7 years old. And, you know, when the abuse started in my family. So there was, the book also talks about, you know, abuse from a parent, narcissistic behavior, sexual abuse. There's a whole bunch of stuff in there. So there's a whole bunch of stuff to forgive and you know, meditate on. So that's what I was doing. I was repairing my childhood, and didn't know that for a very long time. So now I know that, which is good. And, you know, it doesn't change what I do or what I've done, but I have more clarity on my focus on where I'm going.
That's awesome. And I love that you're like, I was 60 and I didn't know what I was doing, because as a 44-year-old, I'm like, what am I doing? And
That's right.
I think there's still the opportunity to keep reinventing. There's another R word for you, and revising and going forward. And you don't have to know everything or have the perfect path, but you just have to keep going. And I loved hearing you say that, Deb. It inspires me for where I am in my own journey. You're talking about all of this forgiveness and stuff. I do have a question for you, for our listeners and followers too.
Sure.
Where can people learn more about forgiveness or get help if they feel like this is something they need to address or need help with, right? Like, it's one thing for us to be talking about it. And, you know, Deb, you've done tons of work and years of dedication to forgiveness. But if someone's newly looking at this, what can they do? What would you suggest?
Well, I would suggest that, you know, just like when we talked about prayer and meditation, go to what's familiar for you. So if you're a Facebook junkie or an Instagram junkie, go on there and find a group to be in. It's that simple. Nothing can take the place of professional help. And I think, you know, getting, if I had my way, everybody would have a psychologist and to help them through their lives. But, you know, get some professional help. But there's many things out there to get help through. You can find a blog. You can find, I mean, one of my favorite places to get all this is just me, because I'm just so technical, is Psychology Today. But find a blog, find a meeting group. Just go to where you're comfortable. It could be your church. It could be your girlfriend.
Hopefully, Best Ever You. That's what I'm thinking.
Best Ever You.
Like, go to Best Ever You.
You have my blogs
on there. Go read Deb's blogs on Best Ever You. You know, actually, a lot of those writers write for us. You know, we have such a wealth of doctors and psychologists and therapists and writers and so forth on Best Ever You. 800 writers now. It's just cool. So
and there's one, there must be one there they can ask a question to.
Yeah, and you can just easily email anybody. But you know, we're so grateful for you writing the way you write and talking candidly about really tough topics. This is a tough one, and as Kris always says, a tall order. Forgiveness is a tall order with, you know, a lot to it. And so I love that you've taken a really complicated topic and made it, you know, digestible to some extent, you know, that we can learn from. So,
I write everything in a children's book, so we start off really simple.
I love that. You know, I think you said that to me a really long time ago, like 8th grade level, and that's been really a real helpful tip for me for my life too. So I mean, you've been in my life for 16 years now. And isn't that wild? Yeah, I know. We're coming up on 20. So I'm just really grateful for you, and I love how you explain things, and you always get a little bit of wisdom every time you encounter Deb Landry. So I really highly recommend you all grab a copy of Deb's book, Independence. It's a great read. It's a tough read, but it's a great read. And I don't mean tough in terms of like it's hard to read. I mean, it's an emotional read for sure. Would you agree?
Yeah, yeah, it is. I mean, it's my life, and it's just, okay, that's what happened to me. But people that read it say the same thing. And we do have a new book, will probably be another year before it's out, but we do have a book coming out on short stories of real domestic violence situations.
Yeah.
So my partner and I are
again?
just great. We don't have a name for it yet.
No, her name.
Oh, sorry. Jenny Muscatel.
Yes, lovely.
Yes, she is my co-host, one of my co-hosts on Raising Cain podcast, and we are delving into abuse.
Yeah.
So right now we're interviewing people. You can go on Raising Cain podcast and sign up to be on the podcast or to be in the book. So we're reviewing people's stories, and we want to get a full view of what is out there for available resources for women. We're focusing this book only on women. So women empowerment and how these women get out of situations like that. I mean, some of them might still be in the situation. So big domestic violence thing, but it is a tough subject. And my book is sometimes very tough to read, and it's kind of a shocker, but that's what real life is.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah, two things before we go. We're having our summit speakers to give us a chat on 2 questions that we're asking everybody. And the first one is Kris and I talk a lot about the incredible yes. And this is a moment in your life where you said yes to something and it changed your life. You might have multiple ones, but we're wondering if you have one that you want to share with us.
Sure. I'll take it right back to 1999 when my husband was doing a course, a post-grad course in religion, and he wanted to start an after-school program for people in our church. And then it kept getting grandiose, and he finally said he wanted to start this youth organization. And I pondered it for not too long, and I said, yeah, let's do it. And so his idea was given to me, and then it blew up, and now it's Crossroads Youth Center. It was Crossroads Youth Center back then too, but now it's huge. It's international. We're doing a lot of bullying prevention. We do thousands of hours of community service. Just in the state of Maine alone, they do 18,000 hours a year of community service. So that was a big aha. I could have said, no, you want to start a program, you go start a program. But that was a big turning point in my career.
Yeah, well,
That's awesome.
You are hard thing for her.
Yeah, there's a heart for you. Thank you. Yeah. What a cool thing, and what that is an incredible yes, and I love that it impacts and continues to impact so many people. So thank you for sharing that.
Always changing.
Yeah. And the other question we want to ask you about, we have topics of the day, and today's topic is all about mindset. So what would be your best tip for a healthy mindset? What would your comment on mindset be for our listeners?
I think people have to connect mind, body, and soul. And if you're only in one place, because this is one of my problems, I'm always in my head, you need to connect all 3. You've got to have that heart that, whatever your thing is, religion, meditation, whatever, you've got to have that soul. You've got to know and connect that body, mind, and soul. And when you do that and you have a positive outlook, jump out of bed in the morning, think about what you're grateful for. And I'll tell you what I was grateful for this morning. And because I do this, I got up, I had my coffee, I looked out the window, and my thermometer said 40 degrees. And I burst into laughter because it was 2 degrees out. So, I found the joy in, I could make believe it's 40 or 60 out here in Maine, but it's only 2 degrees today. So anything that you're grateful for, I was grateful for a broken thermometer that made me laugh. So try to laugh, try to start your yeah.
Gratitude, the power of gratitude.
That's right. Attitude. It's all it is.
It's amazing. All right. Thank you so much, Deb, for being with us. We really just are grateful for you and all that you do to help people, every life you impact in such a positive manner. So thank you.
And thank you both. This is a wonderful program you're doing. I'm so pleased to be part of it. It's great. So all those women out there, listen to it all.
Thank you, Deb. Thank you. And thank you everyone for chiming in. Have a beautiful day.